Journalism is thriving. Journalism is better than it's ever been. It is less about access than it's ever been. It's more about the truth. It's more about real audiences. Journalism is great right now. The journalism business is a show.
Educate, inform, inspire. The Dan Parsons Show, a podcast that lifts up instead of tearing down.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Dan Parsons Show. I'm your host, Dan Parsons. I'm really excited to chat with today's guest, Matt Wynn, the Executive Director of the Nebraska Journalism Trust. They are the organization that funds Nebraska's very first nonprofit newsroom, Flatwater Free Press. As you know, yesterday was the primary election day in Omaha, and boy howdy, there were some surprises with the race for mayor. Matt and I will discuss, along with his thoughts on the state of journalism in today's upside-down world. Enjoy. Well, it is my pleasure to welcome back to the Dan Parsons Show, Mr. Matt Wynn. Matt is the Executive Director of the Nebraska Journalism Trust, which launched and funds our beloved Flatwater Free Press, Nebraska's very first nonprofit newsroom. Mr. Matt Wynn, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Great to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, I should clarify if there's sticklers in our audience who say I'm welcoming you back. This is actually strategically, or maybe not strategically, literally your first appearance on the Dan Parsons Show podcast.
Wow. Well, in that case, I am honored to be here. Thank you for sharing your intrepid audience with me. I appreciate it.
Well, it's a delight. But you were on the radio show, I think at least once. And for our really astute viewers and listeners, you were my guest on the short-lived It's a Disaster podcast where you and I talked about PR disasters.
Yeah, that was fun. Let's just do that.
I know it. Yeah, we could do that all day long.
Maybe we'll get into that anyway, just accidentally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't think our viewers and listeners care because, seriously, I so appreciate what you've done with Flatwater Free Press. And just for a little bit more ID, you spent over a dozen years at news organizations across the country. You were on the investigative team at USA Today, and you live in Omaha, your hometown in Omaha.
Yeah, that's the idea. I want to do it. Did as much as I could from Omaha, and decided I want to do it for the entire state. So here we are.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, whether you are someone running for political office or you just happen to stumble into my podcast studio, we're asking these same 4 questions of all these folks, Matt. We call it Dan's 4 and Your 1. So I'm going to ask you 4 questions to kind of let our audience get to know Matt Wynn a little bit better. And then you get to fire one back at me. It can be one of those or make up something completely different. Reach into that journalistic tool bag and say, okay, we're going to hold your feet to the fire, Parsons. Answer this. So, all right, if you're ready, let's do this.
Let it rip.
All right. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Omaha, went to Central High School. My parents own a shop in the old market. They still do. My sister runs it these days. It's home. I moved. I traipsed around for a little bit, but I came the Omaha umbilical cord, we call it, kept pulling me back. So here we are.
Nice. People are very thankful you did. Question number 2. What was your dream job when you were a kid?
Man, I did not have any ambitions of any kind. Just ever. Probably wanted to, who knows, steamroll towards death at 27. I think that would have been first. In the great tradition of that crew. Rock and roll, that sort of thing.
Nice. Yeah. Hey.
But I had no talent, so it was easy. That was not even an option.
Yeah, well, I don't believe that for a moment. So, okay. Question number 3. And it's interesting the answers I've gotten from this, especially from politicians. But the most famous person you've ever met?
Oh, God. I don't know. I don't know who the most famous person I've ever met is. I do know that the first time I was I used to work at a place called Investigate Reporters and Editors, and my job, my very important, like the most important part of my job was I snuck hotel carts full of booze up to the suite party that happened at night. Highly illegal. I think their attorneys eventually told them to knock it off. But one day I had the additional, so I was doing that, and then they said, "Hey, you have to come here. You have to escort this VIP." And it was Bob Woodward, and I'm 20. Like, what am I? I'll protect you, Bob. What am I going to do? But I did that, and we made very nice small talk. And I'm not usually shell shocked, but I was that day. That's the word.
That trips my trigger as the most famous person. One of my heroes, Bob Woodward. Wow. So what era would that have been?
This would have been 2001.
Okay. So he was getting ready to write, let's see, what was he writing then? Anyway, I've got all of them on my bookshelf.
A thriller, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Probably fiction.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Okay. Last one for you. What was the first concert you attended?
Yeah. So I think I warned you, I don't have a great memory of anything. I just don't. But so I can't tell you who my first concert was. It almost certainly was some crappy band at the Ranch Bowl or at the Cog Factory or one of those. All my friends were in crappy bands. I was in crappy bands, and we went to crappy clubs. And that's what we did.
The Ranch Bowl. Yeah. So I don't know that I know this. What instrument did you or do you play?
I mean, play is a strong word for what I did with the bass at the time. Now I play piano. I fumble around on guitar a bit. My son is actually talented, so I don't do it in public, but or even in private, really. But that is my chosen instrument, piano.
Oh, yeah, very cool. Okay, your one question back to me.
Well, what about you? I'm curious. Your first band and music. I'm going to do a twofer. I'm curious about musical instrument too. Is that something? I mean, you're a man of the world. You've got many talents. What's your shtick?
Well, so first concert, I'll give two answers. I'll keep this short. People don't want to hear these things, but it is my damn show, so I can go.
Right. Anything else?
So my first memory of an event that I went to, it wasn't a concert. But my dad took my brother and I to the old Pershing Auditorium, which is a pile of rubble now. Yes. And so this would have been back in the 70s. And we saw All-Star Wrestling.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so it was a big deal.
70s, so that was grimy and...
Yes. Vern Gagne. So a lot of it was based out of Omaha. And they were on TV based out of maybe WWT. So we'd watch that was it Saturday night? It was on. My dad and my brother and I. And so my dad, working class guy, auto body mechanic his whole life. So we didn't, it's not like we spent a lot of money on entertainment in the Parsons household, but he took my brother and I to All-Star Wrestling at Pershing Auditorium.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it was, with the chair and people, and so that was my first memory. Musically, I'm a drummer. I've been a drummer.
I never would have guessed that. Actually, now that you say that makes way too much sense. But
it really does. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I after growing up in and around Lincoln, my family moved to Ogallala. So I played in a country swing band.
Oh, cool.
In western Nebraska and eastern Colorado when I was 16 years old. Old guys, in their 20s and stuff. And so. And then came back to Lincoln to go to the university and study journalism at our wonderful school. And I played in a rock and roll cover band all through college, actually for several years after college.
So I want to follow up on something else you mentioned. I didn't know your dad was a mechanic. Do you have any, are you handy around a car? Do you do that for fun or nothing?
God, no. Oh, okay. God, no. No.
Right.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't pay attention. No, let's put it that way. I had other things on my mind.
Got it.
But okay, thank you for doing that. That's really cool. Okay, so it's not often I get to talk with a journalist with your pedigree, and so I know you're modest, and I know you don't consider yourself in that stratosphere, but you are. And so I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about just the state of journalism in America and in Nebraska today. And then we're going to get into what we're really here to talk about that, and that's the voter guide that you're putting out for the city elections. But so the state of journalism in today's upside-down political world. I found this quote just this morning. Hamish McKenzie, who's the chief writing officer and co-founder of Substack. By the way, Substack is blowing up. It's kind of the new platform for a lot of journalists. He said this, the media is going through a major transformational shift, and it's shaping our culture in profound ways. Right now, we're in the age of chaos media. But he says, I think we're on the way to something better than we've ever seen before. So, your thoughts, Matt Wynn, Executive Director of Nebraska Journalism Trust, the parent organization of Flatwater Free Press.
Yeah.
Where the hell are we at?
Look, journalism is thriving. Let's not even begin to pretend otherwise. Journalism is better than it's ever been. It is less about access than it's ever been. It's more about the truth. It's more about real audiences. Journalism is great right now. The journalism business is a shit show. We can say shit here, right?
Yeah, this is a podcast.
It really is. It is broken. It's been a market failure. What is the definition of market failure is when free market can't support things that are good for society and leads to bad outcomes for society. That's this. We have seen a rise in purposeful misinformation, disinformation. We have seen a rise in opinion and ignorance, anti-science, anti-fact, anti-interrogating your own biases. That's bad. But it's all, meanwhile, we have more eyes on good journalism than ever before. We have more people reading it, more people engaging with it, more people taking action as a result of it. One of the best parts about what we're building is we're building a business model to match this journalism. We're doing the best goddamn journalism that we can do. Yep. And then we're building a business model that matches it. And that means, sure, earned revenue, advertising is always going to be part of the equation, one slice of the pie. But we also have philanthropy, which wasn't even there in the olden days.
Yeah.
And in the past, media used to be about distribution, right? Journalism was an accidental way to leverage the audience these guys built. So if you think about TV, TV news was only a couple hours a day for 24 hours worth of programming. And as costs changed, they changed their approach. News isn't part of it. They were selling access to their audience. However you build that audience is fine. What we're saying is, no, screw that. Journalism is important. Journalism matters. And we will find a way to fund good journalism. We're not selling access to an audience. We distribute an audience. We could care less how people get this stuff. Distribution is secondary, tertiary, non-existent. But we do think that good journalism is good for community. It creates jobs in a very real way. We hire people. It also creates jobs through telling the stories of businesses, helping them find funders, that sort of thing. It's really exciting. We're building back. Journalism got left for dead, and we're rebuilding it. It's being reborn now. It's a hugely exciting time to be doing what we're doing.
It absolutely is, Matt. And I see every day the impact of traditional journalism struggling. We talked about this in the pregame. The World Herald, the beloved World Herald, your alma mater, had a shitload of more layoffs last week, and I corresponded with a lot of those folks that I've worked with for 10, 20, some 30 years in this state. And so you juxtapose that with what this new model of journalism that you're doing from a nonprofit, building it from a nonprofit perspective. But still, I'm mystified with how we can keep how the consumers of news can keep track with everything that's going on. Take Washington, for example. Now, we've got this tariff war.
I'd rather not, if that's okay. But
well, I'm just going to touch on it, and we don't have to talk about the particulars, but just the idea that we've got a tariff war that's going to impact Nebraska agriculture. We've had cuts in education, higher education, that are impacting a already strapped for funds University of Nebraska system. Not to mention all the government layoffs. So how do you go about covering all those issues here in Nebraska and how it impacts our citizens in this new era of decreased access to information.
Yeah. I mean, with Flatwater, one of our core beliefs is that news has to slow down, that we shouldn't. The answer for 25 years now, since the advent of the internet, for traditional journalism is, we're just going to do more. Instead of publishing 1 or 3 newspapers a day or whatever it might be, we're going to publish every second of the day. We're going to publish hundreds, thousands of stories a day. And that's how we're going to grow audience. That's how we're going to matter. I don't think that's right, especially when the newsmakers, the people who are actually creating policy, that sort of thing, are trying to seed and spin constantly. Doing more it's playing the wrong game. It's got the wrong scoreboard. We need to slow down. The real opportunity, the real way to resonate is to slow down and do things that are final, that matter, that really get to the hard answers, regardless of how long they take to get. That is harder. It's harder to know what a story is in that context or with that goal. But I just think that's the only way we can do it. I'm pretty worried about the antagonism by public servants. Really, journalism covers public servants. That's mostly what we do, or that's one of our highest callings. And it's supposed to be an antagonistic relationship. It is respectfully antagonistic.
Yes.
It's supposed to be trust but verify, like Reagan said, all that stuff. And then what we get is, oh no, we're going to nickel and dime you for every records request. We're going to take end roads to get around that stuff. We're going to, maybe not use email at all, so there's nothing for you to request. We're going to do everything through other channels or in person.
And that happened right here in Nebraska. You're talking about a case that you took all the way to the Nebraska Supreme Court.
But it's not just us. I mean, this is constant, and this is at every level of government. This is rinky-dink little city governments or town governments or, agencies you've never heard of doing this stuff as well. That's pretty terrifying. Doing the public business outside of the public eye, purposely eschewing, hiding from, keeping secrets from the public. We're in a bad spot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that sets up my next question topic here really well, Matt. The White House Correspondents Association says the Trump administration should abandon its wrong-headed effort to take control of the press briefing room seating chart. In a memo to its nearly 900 members this week, the White House Press Association charged the White House with trying to, quote, exert pressure on journalists over coverage they disagree with. Axios and CNN reported just on Sunday that the White House intends to take charge of the seating assignments, bigfooting the association, which has managed the matter for decades. And so how do we deal with that? That's really depressing to see this association that has managed that room on behalf of the American public for generations now to just be thrown into chaos.
Yeah. I mean, look, I never want to be a guy who says change is bad or we got to leave things as they are and we should never rethink them. And I would never do that. However, I would certainly never say, well, let's give it to the politicians. That's a great outcome. Let's do that. That'll work. That won't work. That's a terrible idea. Honestly, too, I don't know that there is a solution. I really don't know that there is. I think you just continue to do the best journalism you can do. Whatever roadblocks they throw up, you work around them, you go over them, you dig under them, whatever you need to do. If it means that they can't get their message out as effectively, that's probably okay. I think that would be fine. They've got any number of levers they can pull on that. Honestly, why? Who don't you have something better to do than worry about seating charts? Charts?
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me, and maybe we can get into this, into the archives of Dan's memory of, because as you know, I worked in government before I went out on my own as a public relations professional. And I worked for 6 years in the state attorney general's office. And I worked for a boss, Don Stenberg, who, it was my job to get his message out. And again, that was a different era. It was, if I get him on 10, 11 News once a week, I did my job. And we did that. But there were times when, even in Nebraska, there was journalists that he didn't necessarily want to talk to. And It was my job to be that gatekeeper. And it was really uncomfortable to follow the direction of my boss, but at the same time, establish those relationships with the news media. Because if I lost their trust, if they didn't trust me, there's no way I was going to get our message out. So anyway, I can relate to that.
I also think, though, like, that's fine for politicians to block it. Look, I always say people are going to use whatever tricks they've got, whatever moves they've got. I keep making game metaphors. I don't know what that means. But people are going to make the moves they're going to make. If they have those cards, they're going to play them. If they don't want to talk to a journalist, that is fine. It is on the journalist to try to give them the opportunity. And then we can say in a story or on a broadcast, we gave them the opportunity to respond to this, to correct anything, to let us know we were off base, and they declined. Fine. Yeah. They've got their moves and we've got ours.
Yeah. And shining light is always better than shutting it off.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I would never, just as a human, I would never not want the opportunity to respond to a critique. If I thought there was any validity to it, if I thought there was a conversation to be had, as long as it's in good faith. And look, some journalists are not acting in good faith, but most are. As long as they're acting in good faith, that's a conversation that I think anyone should be willing to have. And if they aren't, that should raise eyebrows.
Well, and again, I appreciate this conversation, Matt, and we need to do this A, more often, and B, in a longer format. So I promise I'll have you back on to do this. But okay, well, speaking of shining the light and keeping people in power, holding them to account, or people who want to be in power, holding them to account, Flatwater Free Press in Civic, Nebraska are producing a voter guide this spring for the Omaha and Lincoln city elections. Omaha had its primary yesterday, and we can maybe talk about that a little bit. Lincoln's is next week on Tuesday. And so we've partnered here at the Dan Parsons Show with Flatwater and Civic, Nebraska. Thank you for that opportunity. So we're interviewing all those candidates and handing that drivel over to you guys to highlight in your voter guide. So maybe just talk about that project a little bit, Matt, and how people can engage in that voter guide.
Yeah, voterguide.flatwaterfreepress.org is where this is. If you head to just Flatwater's site, you'll find a link for it down the page there. What we've done is for Omaha and for Lincoln, the primaries and the generals, profiled every candidate, every issue that's on the ballot. We did this. This is the second time we've done something like this. We did it in the fall as well with state level races. And really, that was an experiment for me. That was, well, it seems good to do something for people. I think we can bring something to bear here. I think we can inform the public. We can give them something valuable when there were all those ballot initiatives and that sort of thing. And it blew the door off the hinges. More people looked at that stuff. It was impactful. It resonated. And so we thought we'd try it again for municipal elections this year. I am here to tell you what a nightmare. The timeline is super protracted.
It is.
The deadline to register is like weeks before the actual primary occurs. Very little time to get your ducks in a row and do the interviews. And yet, credit Ryan Hoffman, our managing editor at Flatwater. He really just put this across his shoulders and carried it across the finish line. He put together explainers on the candidates, reached out to all of them, got them to say what their main issues were. You obviously talked to them. We were able to include those videos of them explaining themselves, what they're trying to accomplish, what they do here. And the end result is just a really nice, informative, one-stop shop. Here's what's on the ballot for you, and here are your folks you're going to choose from. Go with God.
Yeah. Well, and like we talked earlier, with the demise of traditional journalism, even here in Nebraska, fewer and fewer news. I mean, it used to be a common thing. Voter guides used to be more proliferate than they are now, it seems like. And so, again, good on you for recognizing in your organization that, yes, we need more information. And again, it's incumbent upon us as voters to take advantage of trying to educate ourselves before we go into the voting booth. And that has changed. You mentioned the short time frame in these city elections. Well, now, we many of us are voting ahead of the election day. Yeah. I'm into that mode now. I love having I just mailed my ballot in 2 days ago, a week before the primary here in Lincoln. And so to be able to have that on my desk and do my research, and it's just a convenience tool for me, and I know a lot of people. So again, that kind of changes the dynamic of timing as voters of how we educate ourselves. So thank you for doing that. It's important.
It is important. I mean, I hope that we can continue to do it. Municipal might maybe pull my hair out, but I just think it's the right thing to do. We try to do slow news purposely, like I said previously, but the voter guide is just such a resource. It's such an evergreen or relatively evergreen resource that I think it's worth it.
Hey, before we run, I just wanted to speaking of elections, so we're recording this on whatever day this is. It's going to go live on Friday. But the Omaha City primary was last night. It was yesterday, and a bit of an upset. Your thoughts on of how that turned out? I'm not asking you to.
Yeah, John Ewing blew me away. I had a toss-up. I thought it could have gone any number of ways. I felt pretty confident that the incumbent would make it through. She's been mayor for 1 million years, and why not make it 1,000,004? And really, she hasn't screwed anything up in a big way. There's no reason to, no one is coming for her head or anything.
Doesn't seem like it, yeah.
But John Ewing got major vote. He didn't just squeak it out. He kind of blew the door off the hinges. And I think we might have a race in our hands in the general, which is not something I would have bet prior to this election. I did not have that on my radar screen at all.
It's certainly a different dynamic. Of course, former state senator Mike McDonald, came in third, didn't make the cut. And I think most people thought that was, he had name recognition, but so does John Ewing, obviously in that district, being in office for several years now.
To me, the interesting question is now what? McDonald, we might have a story we don't know. McDonald got a lot of funding. I want to say 2/3 roughly of his funding from the labor unions.
Yeah.
Where's that money going to go in the general? And
it's not obvious.
To decide the election or play a huge role.
Yeah, and what does McDonald do? Does he put his finger on one of those candidates? It'll be fascinating. And again, I would encourage our listeners and viewers to find that voter guide from Flatwater Free Press. Educate yourselves, whether you're in Omaha or in Lincoln, and get ready to vote in the May general election, just a few weeks away.
Yeah. Always vote. I think turnout yesterday, they expected 30%, and it was in the 20s. So your vote actually matters here. Some of these were decided by dozens of votes.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah. Well, Matt Wynn, thank you, sir. Thanks for
Parsons
hanging out. Thanks for hanging out. I love what you're doing. Keep doing it.
Likewise, my friend. Keep it up.
And we'll get you back on soon. Hey, that was fun. I really enjoyed having Matt Wynn on today. Nebraska is very fortunate to have his keen sense of wit and journalistic standards. Thanks to Chase Porter, who produced this episode. Penology Tech Solutions for their technical help and equipment. Kim Remington, Parsons Public Relations Director of Operations. And most importantly, thanks to each of you for listening and viewing. Don't forget to hop on over to our YouTube page and hit the subscribe button. That's the show. Thanks for tuning in. Now go do good things. I'm Dan Parsons.